folks, this is Lorenzo. Today I'm going to be talking about sleeves. Many people find sleeves the most challenging part of making a garment. I'm going to share some techniques I use to make sleeves easier to draft and attach. The close-fitting set-in sleeves on a 14th or 15th century gown require some of the most careful fitting, so that's what I'll be focusing on. First, let's talk about the curve at the sleeve head and how it works. For this, I'm going to need a snack. Let's imagine that this is your body, and this is your arm. And this is the fabric you're going to use to make your sleeve. Now, if you're making a T-tunic, where the sleeve sticks straight out from the body, then you're already done. You've got a rectangle. But the problem with that sleeve is that when you put your arm down by your side, you get wrinkles in the armpit, and we don't want that. So instead, we're going to change this by cutting through so that now the sleeve meets the body at the right angle. When we unfold this, you'll see that we have a curve. Now, if we want the seam of our sleeve at the back of the arm, we change where the seam is, cut our angle, and we have a new curve. If you cut through at exactly a 45-degree angle, this is going to be a perfect sine wave. And with the seam at the bottom of the sleeve, you'll have a cosine wave.
The depth of the curve determines the natural angle of the sleeve. Modern patterns for dress shirts and jackets often have a very deep curve. This looks very nice with the arms down, but doesn't allow for a lot of range of motion. For our purposes, a moderate amount of curve is usually a good choice. To move the sleeve seam from the bottom of the arm to the back, simply take 1/4 of the pattern and move it to the other side. To lay out the sleeve pattern, first we'll need some measurements. Measure the length of the arm from the point of the shoulder to the elbow, and from the shoulder along the elbow with the arm bent, all the way to the wrist. Then measure around the bicep, the wrist, and the elbow, again with the arm bent. Now we can start drafting our sleeve. There are many ways to do this, but this is what works for me. Start with a rectangle using the bicep and arm measurements. Next, we'll lay out the curve of the sleeve head. Mark out quarters at the top edge of the sleeve, then 2 horizontal lines at 2-inch intervals. Use this grid to draw out the curve. Mark the wrist measurement centered at the bottom. If we draw lines straight from the shoulder to the wrist, the sleeve will be too narrow at the elbow. Instead, use the shoulder to elbow measurement to mark a horizontal line, and mark the elbow circumference measurement at that point. Connect the lines from shoulder to elbow to wrist, and make a smooth curve at the elbow. Finally, make a shallow curve at the wrist end of the sleeve, and don't forget to add seam allowance. The final process is constructing and attaching your sleeve. One of the big problems with a set-in sleeve is getting the sleeve and the arm side to match up. If the two don't match exactly, you end up having to ease in the extra, causing unsightly wrinkles. Rather than tweaking your pattern to try to match these measurements up, instead you can plan for a gap and fill it in with a gusset. These gussets are found often in historical examples, and even became a major fashion trend. So don't feel like this is cheating, it's just smart tailoring. Here's the way I do it. First, we'll line the sleeve as a flat piece so it has finished edges all the way around. This is easy to do on a machine. The edge of the arm's eye should also be finished in a similar fashion. You want the arm's eye to be a few inches larger than the sleeve head, but there's no need to be exact. This is a good time to make your buttonholes. Sew up the back seam of the sleeve from the end of the wrist opening to a few inches before the shoulder. Match up the top of the sleeve head with the shoulder seam and sew it all the way around without easing it in. You will be left with a gap at the back of the arm. You may need to adjust the sleeve seam so that the gap reaches the point where the arm meets the torso. Now all that's left to do is to make a gusset to fill in that gap. Measure the sides of the gap and draw out a template on a piece of heavy paper. Baste your outer fabric to the template, iron the seam allowance, and sew your lining on around 2 edges. Remove the template and finish up the last side. Then sew your gusset into the gap. If you're lucky, you can use the same gusset template for both sleeves, but they may be slightly different, and that's okay.
I hope I've given you some ideas that will help you make more satisfying sleeves. This basic pattern is a good starting point for making sleeves with a variety of shapes. Don't be afraid to experiment. Until next time, keep crafting and stay safe.